Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. You guys know that we hate socialism on this podcast, like totally hate it. And yet we are hearing that it is coming to our beautiful city of New York. We can't believe it. We've seen what's happening with this Zohran Mamdani. He's out there like spouting that he wants this crazy socialism, and people are jumping on this bandwagon. We don't understand it. So we found one of his colleagues in the New York Assembly, New York Republican State Assemblyman Jake Blumencranz. Thank you so much for coming on the program. What is happening?
Tudor, thank you so much for having me on your program. And it is pretty unbelievable to see the momentum and the trajectory of this election thus far with my colleague Zohran Mamdani and the way he's been able to captivate New Yorkers. I think it speaks volumes for the way the Democratic Party has become so detached from their own base in New York, and the fact that we as Republicans have not been messaging correctly in cities like New York. But most importantly, it's scary to see the way that the message that he holds, the ideals that he hopes to espouse throughout this campaign and as mayor, have captivated so many.
I think what totally shocks me about this guy is he's like a real scumbag when it comes to women. He was one of the few people that voted against the revenge porn law to protect women against revenge porn. And he's come out and he's been a huge advocate of, I'm going to use air quotes, sex work, which is prostitution. And that to me is horrifying because you have somebody who doesn't want women protected. He's actually voted against laws to protect women against being abused by men. And when you legalize prostitution like he wants to do in the city of New York, you essentially create a slave system where women are the slaves to whoever decides to become a pimp. I'm like, how does this happen? How do people jump on? How does he have so many women that follow him when he has this terrible policy for women?
I don't think it even comes down to just women. And I think it comes down to a little bit more of the way he's been campaigning. So he speaks to two audiences at a very high volume. He speaks to the ultra left, the DSA, as they're called here in New York, which is the Democratic Socialists, which is the party that he ran with along with running as a Democrat. And he also has a bit of a religious conservative Islam-focused group that has a large population here in New York as well. And he speaks to both at the same time, but delivers very different messages. So he is a sponsor on legislation in the New York State Assembly to legalize sex work in a much greater capacity than we've ever seen in any proposal ever in America. While he also speaks to this religious group as he's going to bring, a more conservative blend, this first Muslim in office in New York City in the way that he would be serving. And it doesn't make any sense. And you see that in some of I think there's a viral moment where Cuomo says, this guy's going to legalize sex work. And this Islamic cleric is like, well, that's absolutely not true. I'd bet my life on it. When he's the sponsor on it in the assembly. I think what he's leaving behind and his message and what New York has been leaving behind is systematically we think that, these individuals on the left are going to protect women in a greater way than those on the right. But New York, the statistics have not been lying. New York has, in the last decade, only 132 cases where convictions of sex trafficking statutes were applied out of the 233 of those same cases that were pleaded down. So we have a 60% lower rate in which we are convicting than the federal government. The federal government is consistently doing better than the state when it comes to these convictions on sex trafficking crimes. And there is no plan in place under Zohran's leadership or under state leadership, under Tish James or any of the DAs or AGs in New York State on the left who are not actually tackling this issue. So we really need to focus on, if we are going to even have a conversation about what we're going to do when it comes to sex work, if we're not talking about trafficking and the way trafficking along with immigration are becoming a problem.
But okay, so what is the plan? What is the plan for what they will do using New York City? Because we know a lot of immigrants are coming there. They're like calling the illegal immigrants there. We know that that is a huge area where we have a big sex trafficking problem. How do you manage this? Is this going to be the hub for them to abuse children? Because we're trying to figure out how this is happening. And it seems like Zohran Mamdani is just calling all the scumbags to New York to say, hey, we want to make sure that kids are as unsafe as they possibly could be.
Well, Tudor, I don't know if you saw recently, there was a viral moment in which someone was pulled over in another state with a New York state license with a name on the license as no name. That was their name on the license. The green light laws have allowed for individuals here in New York to basically get access to services, access to licenses without virtually any identification at all. It's a form of protection to them. But the people they leave behind are those who will end up being trafficked like this, are people who will end up being forced into work, forced into sex work. I worked when I was younger in a district court, in a county court rather, here, where we had an adolescent diversion program, and we would just systematically see individuals who've been stuck in this cycle who are just being let in. They were let out to services were not being provided in the way they needed to, and that entire system has just become institutionalized by the state. You'll see it spread, because if you can come in here, get a license, get legitimacy in New York State, and then spread around the country, these programs are toxic. Then they lead to people going everywhere with the backing of New York State.
How did he go from nobody knowing him to suddenly being the Democrat candidate for mayor?
It's a great question. I think that he hit a nerve because in New York City, party boss system of politics has allowed for there to be a festering discontent with the Democratic process and Democrats in general. So in a lot of these races for Assembly and Senate, our state houses, we're seeing less than 1/4% electing the individual who's going to represent them, because there's so much fatigue towards politics without any real representation. And so you're having the DSA run against Democrats in a primary. The Republicans aren't even putting up a candidate against them because we don't even have the institution to run candidates in the way that we could. And they can either defeat incumbents with just a few hundred votes, or they can win races unimpeded, and they're able to go to the state house and just wreak havoc on the institutions that we hold dear.
I mean, even Schumer is afraid of AOC right now. So we're talking about a statewide race for a federal office, and you've got someone who I guess in this world is a more moderate Democrat who's now afraid of I would say, one of the most radical Democrats in federal office right now. And people are saying in New York, we think that she could actually win. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, he doesn't even know what to say. He's like at a complete loss because he doesn't want to lose his race. But your state has become like in love with socialism. How is this possible?
Well, it's kind of an interesting dynamic here in New York. You have the very, very moderate Democrats who exist in the suburbs, and then you have the very, very radical far left Democrats and DSA members who are in the cities, not unlike many other states. I'd just say that scale has been tilted through legislation on a state level that has sort of disenfranchised the voter, whether it be through gerrymandering on New York State's level, which has been very robust, or it's been the way that they have used the courts to eliminate moderate candidates and to silence moderates who are trying to win in at-risk districts. They've done so in such a way that New Yorkers are left with a race to the left with no finish line, and that race to the left will continue to hurt New Yorkers.
How can we learn from this out? Because, I mean, obviously, I'm looking at this from a Michigan perspective. I just don't get it at all because New York has become so much more dangerous. I lived there in the 90s, and now I look at New York City today. It's totally different than when I lived there. It's become way more dangerous. You have a massive amount of crime, and that seems to be something that people aren't even concerned about. You've got hotels that have been taken over by illegals. I mean, my gosh, you even kill people's family squirrel. How is this possible that everybody's like, oh, it's lovely here?
Yeah, I mean, New York has always been a bastion of the capitalist ideal. New York has been the come with nothing and you can make everything place. It's a place where you can bootstrap your way from nothing to everything. That has been the American dream, has been the New York dream. And New York has been the stepping stone to go anywhere in the country and do anything you want, or to make it here. And if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right? As they say. But what has happened is we've systematically forgotten history. And I think while Zohran, at his time in college, which I guess is his only experience before running for the assembly,
Another thing. How does somebody, I mean, just the fact that you just pointed that out, this is like a college graduate going to run the biggest city in the country. It's insane.
Not just the biggest city, one of the largest armed forces organizations in the world. One of the largest standing armies. and doing so with what I would say is, and what I was trying to say is that he must have gotten an A in PR because he delivers his message in a way that he really speaks to people. But
In
he gets an
theater, I
F
think.
minus, an F minus in history. He does not look at the way New York has been run in the past, the way New York progressives have done well and have done poorly in the past. One of his biggest positions he wants to do is he wants to liberate the ability for New York to debt spend. Now, in the 70s, in the Dinkins era, when they did that before they bankrupted the city, services were eliminated. They started with good ideals and they ended with, where subsidies are going to be cut, where we're going to start cutting services. That is the New York that he inherited, is one that is financially sound as much as it struggles today. And he hopes to liberate that. He needs the state to open the coffers up to let him spend as much as he wants to solve today's problem with tomorrow's money. And if you look at Chicago, if you look at some other inner cities that are just in a downward spiral, you could see America's greatest city fall into the same category if we don't stop him now in his tracks.
I think you give him too much credit by saying he doesn't know history. I actually think that this guy has a nefarious plan. I don't think that he's naive. I think he comes from a family of Marxists, and his plan is to disrupt and destroy.
I'd say you're not incorrect in that his plan is nefarious, and he is not someone to be undermined that he doesn't understand. I think what I always say about Zohran is he means what he says and he says what he means. When he says he's going to legalize sex work, he's going to legalize sex work. When he says that he's going to freeze rents and stop construction of housing or seize the means of production, those are tactful, virtue signaling language mechanisms that he's using to speak to certain audiences. That's how he's attracting the Soros money of the world. That's how he's attracting the outside funds he's getting from nefarious sources. It is totally a calculated play. And if he gets his foot in the door to run a city like New York, the sky is the limit for someone like him with his tactful messaging.
I mean, and he's been groomed since college. Now, obviously, he's not very old, but he has been groomed in college. I mean, he was a part of the Democrat Socialists in college. He started this. His parents, as I noted, his parents have this same ideology, if not worse, and potentially he is the same, and he will take this to a different level. But I just think that it's so bizarre to me to watch how he goes into one group and he's got a different accent. He's got a different style of dress. He's like, I mean, people are calling him Donnie because he's just not even, we don't even know who this guy is. You talk about him getting a great grade in PR. I mean, I think it's just acting. I think he just puts on a great show, and his mother is a actress and filmmaker. I think they've been able to pull the wool over the eyes of New Yorkers, and I just can't understand how it was possible, but I think that the outcome will be detrimental for all of us.
Tudor, for me, I think what's scary to do is look at his record in the state assembly. So what has he introduced? What work has he done there to try and make New York a better place? Now, I'm a Jewish New Yorker, like many here. There's a lot of us in New York State and in New York City.
Well, watch out. I don't think he likes you.
And no, and I'll tell you why. He has a piece of legislation called "Not on Our Dime." Now, it may sound, what does this do? What is exactly this going to do to the Jewish community here? His idea was, in order to stop the support of the state of Israel, he wants to allow the AG to be boots on the ground, closing institutions with tax-exempt status, who do support the state of Israel in any capacity. So for me, my temple, if you go on birthright, if you're just a Jewish person who supports, programs that allow for planting trees in Israel, which almost every single synagogue does, you may fall into the scopes of government to close your religious institution. Now, that is one of the scariest pieces of legislation I had to encounter. And when I saw a room full of legislators who I never thought would actively fight against me, my religion, and who I am and what I stand for on a religious basis, it's a scary time to be combating messaging on a political standpoint, because now it's transcended into what's inherently against our Constitution. I mean, what would our founders think?
Wait, he sponsored this legislation?
This was his. He is the prime sponsor of this. Not on Our Dime is his legislation. It would empower the AG to close religious Jewish institutions if they supported something he doesn't. He is a person who wants to end the conversation if he doesn't agree with you, and he wants to do so in a way where he will use the power of the state, the same way many other socialist and ideology-driven populist candidates have so many times, time and time again. I mean, you can look at so many examples in history.
And that did pass, or that has not passed?
Thankfully, a lot of forces in the state level thought that there was no way that anyone would ever believe that this would be even possible to pass with any sort of public support. what scares me is with a Zoran victory in November, when we meet in January, I could see that coming to the forefront of the conversation.
Well, I don't think that New York mayor is the end for this guy. I think that his plan is power. His plan is to change how the state operates. I mean, New York has the largest population of Jewish Americans in the entire country, and so if you can go in and you can destroy the religious buildings, the religious operations of the Jewish people in New York, in the state, then you have a plan to really hurt Judaism across the country. So if this is his plan as a state assemblyman and then he goes to become mayor, I don't think that mayor is the ultimate goal. I think that he goes on to be governor and he goes on to continue to try to destroy. I mean, I really believe that this guy is a destructive force.
I would agree. And I think it's imperative that everyone on either side of the aisle who seeks to protect the institution of capitalism, the institution of the American way and the way that we love our country. This is a race with an antithesis of that, and candidates who stand to hope and support and facilitate that, whichever side of the aisle you're on, whether it's, and look, I'm not a Cuomo fan by any means. I did not think I'd be in a world where I'd see Cuomo as an ideal candidate until you look at the inverse of that in every single way. I mean, Cuomo has helped create so many of the problems that we have and are experiencing today in trying to deal with Zoran and his faction and trying to satisfy them, only for them to be consumed with a candidate like Zoran who will not only destroy anyone who tried to be moderate and sit at the table with him, but anyone who tries to get in his way.
That's what I think to myself. I'm like, what kind of a world do we live in where the actual rational people are saying, okay, he resigned in disgrace as governor, but you know what? He's a heck of a lot better than what we have coming if New York ends up with a Mamdani mayor. I mean, this could be catastrophic. So now we're forced to go with the guy that none of us would ever choose. And yet it is still hard to get people to coalesce financially around him. There's a month left. There is time to educate the people of New York City on who Zohran Mamdani actually is. However, there doesn't seem to be the money to do it, and I don't understand. I see these real estate moguls in New York going, this can't possibly happen because he will destroy our businesses. Well, I mean, any business that is successful in New York City, he has listed you as a target. He has said he will go after you. He has said he wants to take your money and make it hard for you to live there. And yet they're not investing in the campaign against him. I don't understand what's going on.
Well, New York is a kind of a tricky place because right now you're stuck with a lot of pretty poor choices. And that's kind of been a through line in New York. Yeah, I can't make fun of Zoran so much as being a young guy who entered the ring in the elected world. I'm a younger elected myself, but the system itself is broken here. I entered because the system was broken. Young people were not being heard. Young people on our side of the aisle, young people who hear and understand the call of freedom and democracy and the call to liberate our markets and allow the state to actually do what needs to be done to make sure we can have that era of success and of prosperity again, of allowing for more housing to be built in places where it should be, allow for free markets to do what they have to do to make sure we can bring down prices. And to have someone like him come into this picture and call for government expansion as a way to not limit freedoms, but inherently that's what he's doing, a way to expand. I think he wants public housing to be built by the government. We've seen NYCHA, now the worst landlord in the history of the country, and continues to systematically hurt its residents. People who live in NYCHA buildings are suffering. The government is the slowest and least responsive. There is no real litmus test to whether or not they're doing a good or bad job, and they've allowed the buildings to fall into a decay that we can't escape. And they think throwing good money after bad is a way to fix a broken system when it just simply is proven in New York it's not.
No, he wants to take over grocery stores. One of the things that has made me very concerned for New York City is his rhetoric against the police. He is very anti-policing. He's trying to walk that back. I would believe what he says at the beginning. He's been anti-policing since the days of George Floyd. He is about having a social worker show up to a domestic dispute, one of the most dangerous places to send somebody in the midst of a domestic dispute, to not have a police officer with a weapon that can defend himself and the other person in that situation. But he is totally against policing. And that also is not getting enough attention. Why? I mean, the police force alone, if they came out and voted against him, would have a massive impact in this election. Where are people when it comes to public safety?
Unfortunately, I think you have a lot of people who just feel sick at the system to the point where they don't want to hear the rhetoric coming from the Democrats anymore that, yes, I support the police, but you have had, even in this administration, relatively supportive one when it comes to Eric Adams for our police institutions in some capacity. And it won't change or move the needle unless you have full throttled support for increasing our police force in a way that is not based on any sort of litmus test of diversity or anything else that the programs that we've seen in place, but really just trying to go back to the fundamentals, the Giuliani era of policing, the era in which in Bloomberg's time, we were talking about the 90s, the early 2000s, when New York was a place where you can walk around with your doors open, essentially, and that those days are gone. And in a post-COVID era, you need a really, really strong signal and force to say, we're not only going to solve the problems of the past, but we're going to create structural changes for the future to make sure that we can actually make a New York City safe again.
It's not even just that you want to be able to feel safe in your homes. I mean, we have watched over the past few years these attacks in the subway, these attacks on the street. They become so bad. And then you have Eric Adams who said, I'm going to put police down in the subway. And it was interesting to me that did cut down quite a bit, having just the presence, as you've seen in Washington, D.C. and now in Memphis, having just the presence of the National Guard there has significantly reduced the amount of crime. I mean, Washington, D.C. has had no murders, no carjackings. Just the presence of a police force around has a massive impact. We've seen that in the subways. Like I said, Eric Adams, as mayor of New York, has put a police presence into the subways. People didn't love that. I will say there was pushback from New Yorkers. Like, we don't want to see cops down here. Totally. I think that's totally insane because it has certainly cut down on the crime. We were seeing people being pushed in front of the trains. We were seeing people being attacked on the subways. Certainly that's not ended, but it has improved with Eric Adams making more of focusing more on a police presence. Once that all gets taken off the streets, how quickly do you see the fall of New York City?
Well, let me reframe it for you. And this is where I think it's imperative and why you vote and who you vote for is important. I met with a shopkeep in an outer borough relatively recently. He was arrested and put in jail. The situation he was in was he had someone in his store who was stealing his merchandise, and they were stealing high-value merchandise. This is a merchant who needed this merchandise to survive, who was a small business owner. And because this individual was stealing his food, he ran out onto the street. He spoke to an officer. He said, "Officer, I need your help. Someone is trying to rob my store." They said, "We cannot answer your call on the street like this. You need to call it in." He called it in. They said that they won't be there for a long time, if they are going to be there at all, because that's the protocol under this small kind of theft that they're having. So what does he do? He and his individuals who work in his store, they held the guy down. He got arrested that day for imprisoning this person until waiting for the police officers. That guy walked away. That man was facing serious charges, and we needed to step in and make sure that he was going to be okay and that real justice was served. But our laws are what let that man down that day. It was not the fact that the police were not there to do their job. It was not the fact that there wasn't a policeman standing on the corner. It was the fact that the laws had supported the thief and not the shopkeep. And that's the kind of trajectory that Zohran wants the city to be on. And that's the scary part about having all the police, the largest standing army in police force in America. Doesn't matter if you don't have laws that support them, who handcuff our police from doing their job.
This is what I tell Republican Republicans across the country who invest in these races, be aware of what is happening in blue and purple states, because those people are getting elevated. Their bad ideas are being elevated. These local elections, when you have some of these radicals that are running for Congress or even state Senate and state House. I mean, in Michigan, we have the same situation. We've got this radical state senator, has never met a tax she doesn't like. Now she's running for Senate, for U.S. Senate. These people always get elevated. This is why I cannot understand why there is not a massive funding movement against Zohran Mamdani right now, but the Republicans are not paying attention to, once these people grasp a little bit of power, and here he has in the state assembly created this campaign that has launched him into potentially managing one of the most important cities in the world. And then what will be next? I mean, that's the crazy part. Do you find it frustrating that you don't see the type of investment in the opponents on the good side that you do on the bad?
Well, of course, it's frustrating, but it's also important that we look at where successes are coming from in Zohran Mamdani, in many of these candidates in AOC. What are they doing? They're talking to people where they're at. They are meeting people online, in platforms, in parasocial relationships that are important. I myself have been trying to operate in a way where I can do something similar. I think many young candidates are. When I see issues when it comes to trafficking, I'm going to speak to people about it online, in person, anywhere I can until they listen and they hear. When I talk about, we've tried to audit our education system here in New York. We have an issue where Holocaust education is one of 3 topics that are required teaching here. And you're seeing the city kind of neglect to teach it in many places because people are graduating, they don't know about the Holocaust. We want to audit it. They tell us nothing's wrong, and you can't say that. You can't say that they're not teaching, because then you're going against teachers. We're not going against teachers. We're going against a system that's ignoring the law, which is you have to teach about the Holocaust. And we need to make sure we're auditing every single school. So if there's a deficit there, we can help understand where the deficit is coming from. We're not making any accusations. We just want to know why, when someone graduates high school and they don't know what the Holocaust is, and it was one of 3 required teaching units, what happened, right? How do you get that message to people when they're not necessarily listening in the way they used to a news cycle? We need to think differently. We need to act differently. We need to come up with different messages for different parts of the country. Politics isn't one size fits all. I think you see in Michigan, it's a unique space. You're seeing a very unique political environment that is meeting a very, very unique geography and a very unique demographic environment. We have the same kind of system in New York. You can't just say, red-blue politics makes sense in a one-size-fits-all fashion.
So, all right, last thing. Tell us what you think is the future of New York City. Does he win? Give us your best guess.
Well, I think if you have a 2-way race between Assemblyman Mamdani and former Governor Cuomo, I think there's a world in which a last-minute change can happen. New York City is notorious for an 11th hour shift. You saw it with Zohran. You saw it with de Blasio. You saw it with Mayor Adams at times, and you saw it time and time again in different elections. So as long as the race is not split amongst the never Zohran camp, which it very well may be if we still have a Republican candidate in the race, and we still have, now the mayor has aptly departed from the race very recently, you can see a consolidation that could put up a real fight. I think then you'll see money start to follow when the math starts to make sense.
Well, we'll be praying here that we don't lose New York City, but I guess there are some people that feel if we do, then people will really learn about socialism. I'd rather we not learn that way, but I appreciate having you on today, State Assemblyman Jake Blumencranz. Thank you for what you're doing.
Tudor, thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com or the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can watch it on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon. Join us next time and have a blessed day.